Are you planning a trip to Italy and wonder how much to tip? Well, stay tuned, because today we're going to tell you all you need to know about tipping in Italy.
Stay tuned.
Hi everyone, I'm Rick.
And I'm Andrea, and today we'll answer a question that we get very often. Should I tip in Italy? But first, if you like travel-related videos like this one, now is a great time to subscribe button down below, so you'll never miss any future videos.
Yeah, and maybe even hit the bell button as well.
Absolutely. So let's begin. How much do you tip in Italy?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, let me first start by explaining that tipping in Italy is not expected, but it's always appreciated. Tipping is not as common in Italy as it is back in North America, like in the United States or Canada. Many people will not expect a tip, but they'll be grateful if you leave one. So here's some tips that'll help you handle this situation with ease.
First of all, tip in cash rather than using a credit card. If you do use a credit card to pay, your server is unlikely to receive any tip. Most of the time, the credit card machine is not even set for tipping, so leave some change or leave cash for the server. Second, never leave a tip using small change. Use 1 or 2 euros coins instead, or a 5 euros bill. And then the owner of a business is not entitled to get a tip. If you want to give the tip, give it to the assistant, the waiter, or anybody that makes the experience fantastic, but not the owner. Lastly, tips are not expected. Don't give someone a tip if they are pestering or asking for one. It creates a negative precedent and encourages them to continue acting rudely and ask tip to tourists, which is not correct.
That's right. Actually, some people do ask.
Yes. How much should you tip a restaurant?
Yeah, so that's another interesting one. I'd say if you're heading out to eat in Italy, you might be wondering, how much should you tip? Tipping is not customarily required in Italian restaurants. Most of them include a service fee called servizio in the total, but you can still give a little tip if the service is good. Now, some restaurants also charge what they call a coperto, which is a nominal fee for items like bread and water and flatware, and it's usually between €1 and €4 per person on the menu. But the amount of the tip depends on the type of the restaurant. Like for regular restaurants, pizzerias, trattorias, if you tip €3 to €5, that's normal for the table. If you dine in high-end restaurants, well, maybe then you would give 10 or 20 euros depending on how good the service was. Now, like you said before, it's not a good idea to tip the waiters by just putting the cash on the table and then leaving. It's best to wait for the waiters or pay at the restaurant's cash register. Of course, if there's a tip jar, you can put your tip money in there. Or you can approach the waiters directly and hand them the tip, and they will be very grateful for it. Now, here's a fun fact. The coperto is a small fee that Italian restaurants add to your bill to pay for the bread and the cover. Servizio, also known as the service charge, is added to the bill when there's a lot of people at the table or when there's a lot of tourists in an area. So how much should you tip at bars and cafes?
Well, many people think it's customary to tip your barista in Italy. In reality, most places don't tip baristas, and when they do, it might be only 50 cents or something like that, especially because one espresso costs €1.20, €1.30, so you might want to tip a waiter at a coffee shop if you have a drink served at the table. In this case, you can leave 1 or 2 euros as a tip. In some coffee shops, you might find a board that serves caffè sospeso. This is a very interesting custom in Italy. Basically, people can prepay 1 or more coffee and stick their receipt on the board, for people that cannot afford the coffee. The person that cannot afford the coffee can walk into a coffee shop, grab the receipt from the board, and enjoy a coffee for free.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
How much should you tip your taxi driver?
Oh, well, taxi drivers in Italy should not expect tips. If you're happy with the service, yes, you can give a taxi driver, €1 or 2, maybe just round it up. But how much your tip depends on how well you think they the way they help you, like with your luggage, if they treat you with respect, if they drive very well. But never tip a driver if he asks for a tip or doesn't want to use the taxi meter. Well, there is an exception. If they have a flat rate, for example, from the airport or a train station back to a downtown area, flat rates, in those cases, they don't use the meter. In other cases, if the taxi driver doesn't want you to use a meter, take note of the license plate number and report the driver to the taxi company. Now, how much do you tip barbershops?
Well, getting a haircut is something that you might want to do while you're planning a trip to Italy. You can get a haircut at a barbershop or a salon, which is something that you should think about while you're traveling. Before you make an appointment, keep in mind that tipping is not required and not expected at the hair salon.
That's the theme.
Yeah. Also, in many shops, the barber is also the shop owner, so it does not entitled to any tip. Now, how much should you tip a gas station?
You should tip at a gas station? Look, if you're driving in Italy and you need to stop for gas, it's not necessary to tip the gas station attendant. The price of gas includes the service charge already. Consider giving the gas attendant a tip only if they provide you with some extra services, like checking the oil level, cleaning your windshield, or maybe inflating your tires. We recommend that you give them a tip between 1 and 2 euros in those cases. And I gotta tell you, I had them add some air to our tires once and offered them money. They didn't want it. So, what about tipping at hotels? How much should you tip?
Most hotels have service available around the clock, and that make your stay more comfortable and enjoyable. Most likely, this is one time when standard tipping applies. So, leaving tip at hotel is fine, but not required again. What amount should you tip at hotel? It depends on both how good the service was and how many stars the hotel has. For the 3 to 4 star hotels, you can follow these steps. The housekeeping staff works hard to ensure your stay is comfortable as possible. You can show your appreciation by tipping, usually 1 to 2 euro for each day of your stay.
And do you tip the porters?
Well, even though tips of the hotel porter are not required, they usually appreciate it. So people usually tip 1 euro for each bag at the hotel. But do you tip waiters?
Well, I guess it's kind of like a restaurant, right? Leaving a tip at the end of your meal is a nice way to say thank you to the server for all of the hard work that they do. A tip, either a percentage of the total cost of your meal or a set amount for each meal, is appreciated, but it's not mandatory. I say we suggest leaving a tip at the end of your last meal if you've had the same server the whole time you've been in Italy. You could also leave a tip at the front desk for all of the kitchen staff to share. Now, what about the room service waiter? Do you tip them?
Well, when you're done staying at the hotel, it's nice to leave 1 or 2 euros on a tray for the room service waiter, but it's not necessary. Again, Italy is not a tipping place.
And not common to get room service.
No. What about bartenders?
Yeah, same thing. In Italy, bartenders don't usually get tips, but you could round up, and leave $10 for your €9.50 drink if you want to. If you're ordering a bottle of wine, ask the bartender what they'd recommend. Of course, they'll be happy to help. Now, what about if you visit a spa? How much should you tip the spa attendants?
Spas are where you get to relax and unwind, which is why we think it's important that you tip your spa attendant. It's not required, but we think it's the right thing to do. If you're feeling generous, you can leave a 5% to your additional
or 10% if
or
they do
10% if they really do a very good job. Should you tip your tour guide?
Well, as a tourist in Italy, you might be wondering how much to tip your tour guide. Well, when choosing to tip, it's important to remember that tour guides are not tipped in Italy. It's a profession. The price of the trip includes their salary, so tipping them is not necessary. However, if you feel that your guide went beyond or they added additional value to your experience during your trip, then leaving them a tip could be appropriate. A good rule of thumb in tipping tour guides could be between 10 and 15 euros, depending on how much you think the guide helped you. Now, if you're going with a group and you want to give a tip together, consider approaching the other group members first before offering up a tip. This way, everyone has the chance to contribute if they wish. Now, what about those free tours?
Well, in some cities you can take a free walking tour. Those tours are becoming more and more popular all over the world. Usually the guides are volunteers that work for tips. If you take one of these tours, it's customary to give the tour guide a gratuity of at least 10 euros per person, because that's their salary. They don't work for salary.
That's the difference, right?
That's the difference. So what currency do you tip in Italy?
Well, this is something that we discussed a lot. You might be inclined to tip in US dollars, but in Europe, they use euros. In fact, if you tip the person in US dollars, the person receiving the tip is probably going to have to pay a fee to convert the tip back to euros. For this reason, we suggest you to keep some local currency with you for tipping purposes. Now, are there any difference in tipping rules, let's say between cities like Rome, Milan, or Venice?
No, there's no tipping rules that are different in each part of the country, including the island of Sardinia and Sicily. The tipping rules are exactly the same all over the country.
Yeah. Well, we hope that this video answered most of your questions about tipping in Italy. As usual, if there's something else you'd like to know, leave a comment below because we love to read and respond to your comments.
In the meantime, we'll see you on our next video.
Ciao.
Ciao.